and welcome to your Daily Game Face. I am Dr. Kim Lannon, and I am here with Lou with a clue.
That was a tight opening.
Why?
It all worked?
I know, it was.
You hit your cue?
I hit my cue, and I didn't even watch for you.
Yeah, I know.
And because I was doing something else. And I'm also trying. My monitor is up so high because the person that used the studio before me is older and very deaf, and I am screaming in my ear. All I hear is a lot of echo, feedback, reverb, and screaming.
Still?
It's better.
All right.
It could be better, but it's fine.
Everything could be better.
I know. So, well, good morning.
Good morning.
How are things with you?
Me, I'm doing okay.
Yeah?
Tired.
Why are you tired?
Because I'm working a lot.
Oh. Well,
don't give me oh.
Well, I'd say how much I work, but
I know.
It's hard when you say how much you work and people criticize that and have like comments about like that, like as if like they're jealous. Like, you want to work that long? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I do my job and like to go out of my way to make sure like all my clients get every one of their needs met. There's that.
I just want my bills paid.
Well, there's that too, but I actually like what I do for a living, and like, I'm not saying you don't,
No,
but
I do too, yeah.
I love what I do for a living. So I make sure I go the extra miles. I make sure that I, if an extra person needs to see me, like someone needed like an emergency on Sunday, they texted me, they said, we know it's Sunday, and it was a clear emergency, and I got to it. You know why? Because that's who I am as a doctor. I make sure I take care of those things and move things aside and do things, because as long as they are within the bounds of those things, I do that.
Yep.
And I do that all the time. And there's people out there critical of that. And it's just unbelievable.
But like
unbelievable.
Chapter 2 of my book would have been that I can't write anymore. The Bill Belichick book. Just do your job, right?
Well, yeah. But you know what the problem is? There's so many problems, but one of the problems that I found throughout my life, and this is with successful people and in talking about like entrepreneurship, and I sit with, people in groups and colleagues that talk about this, is, and this is like in any company too, when you do a really good job and you do your job, you get criticized for it. Mm-hmm. When you don't do a good job, there's people that will join you in not doing that good job and have a party. Yeah. But you do a good job, and then all of a sudden people are like, well, God forbid you do that much, and how many hours do you work, and how can you have time for it? Like, how about you?
It threatens them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, because I think that I'm talking about it right now in terms of like me, but I'm also talking about the fact that I have clients and I have friends and, that do their job. I have a really good friend who like does her job extensively well, is in the same field. And she goes further and farther in terms of hours and things and whatever than I do. And it's unbelievable how unrewarding and unappreciated and how dinged she gets for doing that. And people say things like, how can you possibly have time for this or that? And because she makes the time.
People in the profession?
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
That's a good subject. We were talking about subjects earlier.
Yes.
How people are influenced by other people, and they don't live their lives, and how you're wasting your time being jealous or having a problem or being threatened by somebody else who does their job well,
right?
Or whatever it is they're doing, being threatened by it is a waste of time.
Well, remember the word is envy, right? Yeah. We've talked about the envy. It's like that they wish that they were you in some way, or they somehow have to bring you. It's the crabs in the bucket thing, right? Like how hard is it to just do your job and not worry about the other lane? Like if I want to work 10 hours this week, or I want to work 60, what is it to you? Right, and as long as I get everything done, and you know me, I do, and then some, what's the problem? Yep. But some people have a very hard time because some people are unmotivated. I'm going to put it that way. And they like to just do the bare minimum, and then they criticize others for doing more.
Of course, this is another thing.
It's just unbelievable.
Social media is amplified.
And
I'm stunned by people who get so involved in this, just scroll. You don't like it? Just scroll.
Scroll on by. Yeah. Well, right. But people feel the need to find, there's so many things I could say, but I won't. It's adversity. we'll just put it that way. So I have going back to my friend that, I mean, she works in a facility where there's like, overtime because it's a residential program. So there's always overtime that you can have because it's overnight. It's people live, but she's on call all the time. So she's on call. So even when she's not doing, she's doing. And now I'm outpatient, individual, private practitioner with my, pokers in the fire on lots of different places because I diversify, and it's the same thing. But man, we're always on because we choose to be, because we love what we do. So, and then we take vacations when we need to, because that's what we do. But she and I were talking about that this week, about how much you do. And if you don't want to do it, or you want to cut it back, you do. You just, you want to take a break, you take a break. If you want to add more, you add more. If you want to, whatever. It's like, but I think it's hard for some people that are very structured and need to be in an environment where they're not self-starters. I think that's part of it. And they're not intrinsically motivated, as opposed to just do the job because I'm hired and then we leave. You know what I mean? Like,
by the way, fine.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
But when you're a person like myself and several of my colleagues and friends and things like that, we're all very intrinsically motivated to do above and beyond and do. And that's just one of those things. So I just, I have.
That's, for me, that's a team thing too. All the
I don't
places
have
I work.
I don't have a team.
All the places I work, it's like if somebody needs some help, you take care of them because they take care of you, and you got each other's backs.
Well, that is the benefit of, like, in my business, like if I'm working with other clinicians on things, that's always a wonderful thing. So I haven't had tons of moments in my individual practice where that's happened because I haven't needed to, but I have had a couple instances where, I've worked for 5-6 years alongside with someone that has been very beneficial and helpful for the whole process. And then when I worked at the hospital, I mean, when you work in a hospital, it's great because you have a huge team of people that are there. And I did that for almost 10 years. So that was fantastic. But, when you do consulting or things like that, it definitely is. Or if I do like things with my athletes, obviously, or families, or I work with outside resources and stuff like that, it's good.
Healthcare workers in hospitals, that's not a job you just do your hours and just, that's a calling.
Well, right. And so, and I think anything in healthcare, unless you really, I think anything in most healthcare workers, for the most part, it is a calling, and it's a dedication, and, and you love it.
Not just there putting in the hours for the most part.
I mean, a lot of people, I could say that there's not a lot. I could say that there's certainly people that should get out of the business that they're in, because you can see burnout in them and all those things, but that happens in anything. But
I'm amazed it isn't more in healthcare.
I actually am too. And in my field, especially, because there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in my field that
and we've talked about it with vets too. And
yes,
I don't know how people do that work.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was talking to a veterinarian in the past week. As you know, that I do that work too, God forbid, diversification to work with lots of people. But she and I were talking about the fact that it's such a thankless job in so many ways, because the more you do, the more you're expected to do. Like, it's just never ending. And you just kind of reset on a daily, or reset every couple of hours, even, because you have to, because it's like, okay, the next person. And she and I were trying to like talk about how, like, I go from, 45 minutes to 45 minutes to 45 minutes. And she goes, sometimes every 15 minutes, like an animal passes, then she has to go into the next room and be all upbeat with a new kitten or a new puppy.
Yeah.
And she said, it's, and I can't, I always think, like, I wouldn't want to do that, because that would be so hard. And people say the same thing about my job. Like, how do you transition from, client to client to client? And I say, and I guess it's sort of the same thing, like, although there's no death, but it's just like you turn one off, you turn the next one on.
But I'm guessing you have
and not said that, and I'm not saying that in that way either. God.
I'm guessing you have a clinical separation.
Yes.
Though, that you learn, and human healthcare workers do that. I don't know how you can do it with vets. I don't know how vets can do it.
Well, it's
because my relationship with animals is, as soon as I see them, It's like they're as good as mine.
Well, that's the thing is the vet I was talking to, she and I were talking about that, and that, she has that too. And like the vet that was with me with Sophie when Sophie passed, you know, she didn't know Sophie, but you would have thought she did.
Oh, of course.
Because she literally fell apart.
Yeah.
Because it was so, I don't know if it was as painful because of Sophie as much as it was watching me be upset. I mean, it was, and that validated the experience. But I think, in my field, we can't do that. We have to be stoic and flat, which we have, I'm animated here because it's different, but
I was going to say that must be challenging for you based on how I know you.
Nope. No, because in the office and that's, certain clients obviously would know me a little bit more with more animation because I meet them where they're at. But for the most part, I just, because it's detachment. It's a boundary distance thing. And 30 years of doing this, you get really good at that. And I think that's one of the interesting things, we were talking about like the year of you, the summer of you, and all those things. And we've talked about boundaries before, and talking about like how to, because people are going to their summer barbecues, and we're talking about family, and that's what I was going to talk about last week. But, boundaries, just because someone doesn't like your boundary doesn't mean you're not setting it, and someone else cannot like it, and just they can give you pushback and they can say all the things they want about it, but
they will.
And that doesn't mean you don't have a boundary. That means you do. And just because someone doesn't like it doesn't mean you don't have it. Like, and people will talk about it. So, you have family members. I had someone go to a barbecue, and I have people coming up into barbecues talking about family work. Right. And working with some of my people who have had addiction issues going into their family barbecues, and people talking about the people that are in recovery now and going to the family barbecue, talking about them. And I'm working with my clients who are in recovery who have to set boundaries, but the family members don't like it because they want to push the boundaries.
Right.
And me explaining that boundaries are your own internal thing. They're not setting it on other people. It's setting it for yourself, that you will not allow them to cross over, which in turn does set it on the other person. But people don't like that. And you get a lot of pushback from people.
Well, we just cycled around. People are affected by your setting the boundary.
Right.
Like they take it personally. Right.
People take boundary setting personally. They distort it. They can become persecuted by it. They can become delusional about it. They can make storylines about it, narratives about all kinds of things. And that's what happens. And so in working with a couple of clients that are coming into some barbecues for like the 4th of July, they're already, we're a couple weeks out, and people are already starting to talk about like, how do I do this with my family? And what, doing like role play scenarios of, well, I'm going to set this boundary. I have people usually set like 1 or 2 internal boundaries. Where's your line? What will you accept? Like, what are the things that will be said, or what are the judgments you're going to, because that's what's coming, or preparing. And their biggest worry isn't being able to actually do the boundary. It's the worry about having to sit with the uncomfortability of the feedback or the judgment that's going to come out of it afterwards. It's going to then follow them from now until next year, because it's the storyline that comes out of like, oh, did you see that? Oh, there must be something wrong with them. There must be something wrong with them if they had to be like that.
Right.
It's like, no, that's just a boundary. That's called a boundary. You're not going to do that. You're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z, or I won't participate in that, or being really blunt. God forbid, you have to be blunt.
Nowadays, being healthy is something wrong.
Well, yeah. Well, and I always
abnormal.
And I always say that, the more, the healthier people get, whatever that is, or the healthier people are.
Yeah.
And not even if you're already a healthy person for all intent and purposes. And the people do one of 3 things. And you've heard me say this before. They grow with you, which is very rare. They stay mostly the same, which is very common, or they regress, most common. Yeah. The healthier you set your boundary, the more people will decompensate around you most of the time. They will either maintain their level of zhuzh, or they will get more decompensated. I see it with clients. I see it with my colleagues, people. I see it in relationships in life. I see it in companies. I see it in my teams when I work with, like, if people set good, healthy boundaries, or they're really doing good work for themselves and just maintaining, people around it that are not healthy will just tank.
Yeah.
And somehow it becomes your fault. It's like you're responsible for the bad behavior of the person because they're reacting poorly to you setting a boundary. Like, what?
Is the opposite of a boundary sometimes useful? In other words,
You mean running amok?
No, I mean
running amok. Yes, let's run amok. No.
Let's do a hypothetical family member and do your mother, for example. You go in to visit your mother, and for a couple hours.
You're talking about my mother specifically, or a mother?
A mother.
Okay.
A fictitious mother.
Okay. Being clear.
Hypothetical mother.
Yes.
And you know that it's going to be a struggle.
Yes.
But I'm going to be there for a couple hours, and then I'm going to just shake it off and just go on with the rest of my life. It's like you don't confront them with a boundary. You kind of.
Well, that is the boundary. Is that you're setting a time limit for yourself that normally. So hypothetically, maybe you'd be a person that would stay for 7 hours in all years gone by at a cookout.
Yeah.
This time you're only staying for 2. There's your boundary.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right. So hypothetically, there's a boundary. People are going to definitely say,
but I'm not going to change her behavior. I'm going to accept her behavior for a couple hours. And then I'm going to shake it off and get on with the rest of my life.
Exactly. Because you're limiting. So in those kinds of scenarios, you're limiting back how much exposure you're having to the toxicity that's coming towards you. And you're not responding to it. Like, that's the other thing, is like, say you're in any hypothetical family situation or friendship situation where someone's saying something to you this summer and you're like, okay, you don't, right?
Exactly.
Right. And if you couldn't see what I just did, I just kind of like a cringe look.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't respond to the content that they're giving you. Like, if they have a snarky comment, if they're trying to bait you into something, you have to recognize what the bait is and not see it as, a lot of people as adults do this because as children, they would get baited into things and they would play the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
I always remind my adult clients to not get baited into things like that, and you have to be so clear. Me, I'm very point blank clear about things. I don't sugarcoat and say, how does that make you feel? I already know how it makes you feel. We talk about it. It's very clear. It makes you feel bad. And therefore, if you don't want it to feel bad, why would you allow it to happen to you? So what are you going to do about it? That's such a foreign concept for so many people, especially a lot of colleagues of mine. They're like, oh my gosh, you say that? I'm like, yeah, yes, I do, because that's what helps people.
Yeah.
We're not going to sit around, and circularly keep going through for 7 months about how does it make you feel. We know it feels terrible. We know it makes
up.
you.
That's when the conversation gets honest.
Well,
cards are up.
Right, and we know that if I already know a client has told me that something makes them feel bad to the point where they go to the family party and they leave the family party and it takes them 7 weeks to unwind from that one visit, I don't need to go over that 700 times to make it, like, let's do something about it. Let's find a solution. So,
okay, let me ask you, in that scenario, what's the bigger problem? The thing that wound them up, that was said, what they had to endure there, or the fact that they hung on to it for 7 weeks?
Well, they're both, it depends. Okay. Yeah. So, cause they could equally be both equal, right? So it really depends on how it impacts the person and how, right? So is it that they're reeling from it for the 7 weeks? Maybe. But that's more of an easy way. That's an easier thing to address, obviously, because, okay, why do we need to hold on to it for 7 weeks?
Yeah.
What is it serving as your purpose? Why are you feeling so bad about it? Usually it's so much more related in those cases to like a traumatic negative narrative that has come from many years prior. That's just an accumulated thing that gets triggered and then it goes
hitting a nerve,
and it's just hitting the nerve.
Yeah.
And now that nerve is reverbing for 7 weeks. And I'm not making up 7 weeks. I mean, this is very common. But instead of it being,
I used to be that way.
right. And so many people are, I mean, this is, it's a thing. But and then it's about breaking down, like, okay, the person's comment or the person's behavior that made it feel that way for 7 weeks. How do we go back into it? That's where the discussions go of, do we go back into a scenario with those people or that person that was making you feel that way? Do you want to not be in that person's life? Do you want them to be, so we start there. Then we find out, now if you do, okay, so then how do you detach? Right. Similar to how I do my business and how most medical professionals do their business is, how do you detach from the emotional piece to not be involved with the for lack of a better term, the crazy that gets built around it,
Right.
to end up not going down that path with them and feeling bad. Well, so that's where we go back to the thing a couple minutes ago.
Exactly.
Time limit. Don't go for 7 hours. Don't go for an overnight. Don't go for a weekend. Don't stay in the house with the people. Get a hotel room. Stay at a friend's house. You have alternatives. A lot of times I'll get met with, but that will hurt their feelings. Okay, but do you want to feel this way for 7 weeks after, or do you want to have but people get into these things, especially with family, that I don't want to hurt their feelings. But your feelings are getting hurt and nobody's doing anything on the other side about that. So why wouldn't we take ourselves out of that and sit with the uncomfortability? You're going to be uncomfortable anyways.
Yep.
Which one's worse? Being 7 weeks of reeling, or you saying, oh, you know what? I'm only going to be able to stay for a couple of hours because I actually have something else to do. And then taking the heat for that and being like, oh, see you next year.
I love how this is wound around a couple of times already. In that scenario that we're talking about, the person spends 7 weeks of their life dealing with something someone else said.
Right.
About the effect of someone else's thinking on your own reality and your own self-worth, your own self-image, your own ego.
Right. And it's usually
that's something you get a question at if a person has that much power over you.
Right. Well, and it's also it's because a lot of people do have power, in the way that they hold judgment over you, or they don't have, their reality is so skewed that their judgment has made you buy into the fact that you have to question your own reality. It's like, wait a second. And that's the gaslighting, the gaslighting that is so ever present all the time. And so many people, gaslighting has, obviously it's a word that gets used a lot, and it gets used in wrong context a lot, but gaslighting is very common because it's so insidious now in people's lives and phrases, and it works so well that people don't see it as anything but that's normal. It's not. And you get a lot of, if you go look up gaslighting, it will say, here are the 10 or 12 or 15 phrases. Oh, it's so much bigger than phrases and things. Yeah. It's overt, it's covert, it's got narcissism written all over it. It's when, people use it as a power differential in certain circumstances. They do it in business, they do it in families, they do it in all kinds of ways, as you and I were talking about before the show today. Yeah. By the way, that thing we were talking about, that was a gaslight. And it just hit me. That was a gaslight. Yeah. Holy crap. Everyone's going to be like, what is she talking about? You and I know. And I'm like, it didn't. Now,
but because of the concentration, it had to be a little bit more overt. If you're in a job situation, your boss can do that to you 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and in smaller increments. And
you can't do it. And you can't technically do anything about it because you're under the power differential of something that holds weight over you. Very similar to families. Right? That's the same feeling, because it's a narrative that someone creates that then superimposes on you that you have to now manage and navigate. Oh, Lou, you and I just came up with a really good.
I understand the reality of that and how it happens, but I just keep going back to my Australian Shepherd and like how he just shakes things off. There's a certain point where you just shake it out and just go, and that's a strong skill set. That's an important skill set.
Well, I mean,
if you're in a work situation, you're 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, that's difficult. But going to your mother's for a holiday or going to your family for a holiday,
right.
The ability to just shake it off is a good ability to have.
It is. And I think, and so on the flip side of that, how there are people that can just shake it off, and that annoys people too.
Oh,
that's the equal,
good revenge.
That's the equivalent of the other side that we're talking about, is that people who get very empowered watching someone fall apart because they've judged them, but then on the other side, equally not falling apart because they've been judged and just being like, whatever. That really irritates, because then you get the gaslight on the other side of, you're so selfish, you don't care, you have no feelings, you have no empathy. It's like,
give
wait,
them an okay and go get a cupcake.
Right. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Or you get the whatever,
right. Yeah,
whatever you say. Yeah. Right. It's like, oh my God. And so you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. And boy, do I have those conversations with clients all the time about, you can't worry about, you can, but it's let's get away from worrying about, you can't win for trying. You've got the double-edged sword. It's poking you at both sides.
yeah.
And you got to be able to sit with, have you made the best decision for yourself? Have you made the best decision that's going to not impact somebody in the worst possible way? Do you stand by it? Are you able to be healthy? Do you feel good about it? And would you do anything different? If your answers are no, and you answer them all in a healthy way, sit good with yourself. Look, if you sleep well at night because you can look yourself in the mirror because you've done right by you and other people, and they might not like it, oh well.
Yeah.
That bothers people, because that's a boundary that's so hard for people to learn over a lifetime. And that's one of the biggest struggles, I think, people, with social anxiety. That's one of the underpinnings of social anxiety, is people worrying about judgment, especially family, because that's where it gets created a lot. The nuances of like the look, the implied look of what are you doing? How is that impacting life? Don't do that. Don't embarrass me. Whatever that comes with,
Best thing about getting older is dropping all that. I mean, we see it all in
Well,
middle school. We see it in high school. We see it in
but
in
I'm
life.
working
But
with.
hopefully, as you get older, you start to drop that.
Well, that's the hope. But I see a lot of it still in people that come to me in their 50s and 60s that they're just now working on that. They've still, the parents are still alive. They're still working on that. I know people. I just know people that have. I don't know if they'll ever be able to get past those things, because they are so wed to them, because they feel obligated more than they feel like they can take care of themselves.
Well, it's ingrained in them. Nowadays, again, middle school, high school, teenage time, early 20s, judgment is your status among your peers and the people you deal with is so important.
Well, and that stems from beginning. Like that doesn't start in middle school and high school. That starts prior to that. I mean, you get front loaded from 0 to 6 years old with stuff that you get. And now I think it's even more now, because your little kids are exposed so much more now to social media and other things that are out there about the messaging that they're getting. Not, before in our generational time growing up in those years, we didn't have that.
Right.
We just had like, hey, I'm standing in front of you and you're getting this information. Now we've got that plus all this other stuff. And then by the time you're 20, or whatever, you have a whole arsenal of not healthy stuff.
Yeah.
Along with healthy stuff. And you have to be able to pick through those weeds. And some people come out of that really great. And most people have more problems with that. And,
and this particular swing was tough because we talk about lack of parenting skills.
Yes.
And how that's become generational, but no one had parenting skills for this as social media started to grow the way it did.
Right. Because everybody's learning as they go.
Because the parents never dealt with it. So,
right. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like learning. It's like learning a new relationship, right? You have to figure out things as you go, because it's all brand new.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with social media. It's like, okay, it's new to you, it's new to me, it's new to the kid. How do you don't know? And there's so much ever growing, every day new. You're having to keep up with it to be able to put, parental control or put something down on it. And so it goes back to the summer July 4th parties. Like you have to learn how to maintain, a good solid space for yourself so that you don't, I have people that actually this year have decided not to go. They've gone back to the whole, I wish it was still a pandemic. Remember those days when people were like, I don't have to go to the Christmas thing. I don't have to go to the Thanksgiving thing. But people have been like, oh, I have something else, or I have to work the next day. Or this year it's harder because it's Friday for 4th of July. But, a lot of people do work on the Saturday so they're like, oh, I can't, or I can't drive there.
Doing something with the kids.
Or there's So I think that in the month of taking care of you, as we're in June and going into July with all these things happening, goes back into that family time. And that wasn't the topic I was on last week, but it came up so much this week about like boundary setting and having blurred lines and how it upsets people, and how when you detach with love, I say, I love you, but I love you from a distance. Right. Or do you detach and it's obvious that someone's not getting to you, but they keep trying to get at you, but how to not let that bother you. And sometimes it's by not showing up. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And people feel guilty about that. So it runs the gamut of like being able to say, you don't have to show up at these things. You can do other things. But then people struggle with the feeling of guilt, like they're getting perceived and talked about that they're doing something wrong because they didn't show up, or they said they had something else to do. And I'm like, just be honest and just say, I can't make it. I can't make it. That's not lying. I can't make it because I can't. And, you don't have to go into, when I'm around you, you make me crazy. I'm sure that people at this juncture, if you're an adult, they know the dynamic. They just might not admit it, but they know the dynamic.
Well, the guilt dynamic, we all know the guilt dynamic and why it makes boundaries troublesome.
Yes.
But what about the things that I see people all the time, and we're going back to social media, but
yes. You love social media.
No, I hate social media.
No, I know, but you love talking about it.
Well, because I think it's important. I think it shapes a lot of people's personalities.
It does.
Because you get people sitting on the couch looking at the riots in LA, looking at what's going on in LA, or looking for something to whip them up.
Right.
That's why would you do that? Go look at cat videos or something.
So I was just talking to a client about this yesterday, about how, it goes back to the show I did a few weeks ago on the trauma, on the trauma bonding thing. And you're always on alarm mode. In health, you're not in alarm mode. And so if you're watching, you can see me, kind of using my hand as like a radar that's always searching. Like you're always on alarm. You're always on alarm. So to your point, in that scenario, people are always on alarm. And then all of a sudden they find the chaos because they look for the chaos, because they like the chaos. Even though that sounds weird,
I know.
There's a chaos that keeps the homeostasis of their alarm system in check, even though it's really unhealthy. The cortisol dump is huge. The endocrinology of your body goes into haywire status, which is all your hormones. It throws your chemical balance off. So all this is, so there's your alarm, goes into chaos. You find the chaos, you get all excited. It jacks you all up, the adrenaline rush. And all of a sudden you go into a very short period of calm. Maybe it's because you went to sleep, or maybe you had to go do something, but then you go right back into alarm, and then you're right back into that searching.
People seeking it out.
You're always like looking for fight and flight. So, and I think that's part of what social media has driven. And so you go from alarm to chaos to calm, ACC, right? So that's what I was telling one of my clients yesterday. You go into alarm, you go into chaos, you find it, or you create it, or it finds you because you're used to it. And then you go right back into calm. Family dynamics are just like that.
Yeah.
That is, relationships are just like that. And those are trauma relationships. Those are trauma bonds. Those are all those things that, that start, you're an alarm for a reason. You don't just start being an alarm in your 20s because you're on alert, because you have a general adaptation system in your body. That's actually a real system that I just mentioned parts of it that are in alarm. So you start the alarm, it's supposed to go into calm, and then it's supposed to stay in calm and not be reset to go into alarm again. When it gets into a pattern of the ACC, the alarm, chaos, calm, and it snaps back into alarm, it takes you out of what our bodies are supposed to do and our mind-body check is supposed to do. And I think more and more people, whether it be because of social media or family interactions or workplace stress or all of that together, makes that happen. And then we're just in it. And the environment that we're in, especially right now culturally, and I say culturally, like as like the whole community of our world around us, is so on alarm all the time. And then you add in TikToking and I always tell people, because people will come in and be like, look at this thing, or look, how do you have that algorithm? Because mine is cats and funny. And you know me, it's cats and dogs and horses and whales and, food recipes, health and wellness. People like, I'm thinking, what are you looking for in your feeds? Oh, and now I have Karen Reed in my feed because we've been talking about it, that's a whole nother thing.
No,
but
it's funny because I was going to use as an example the Diddy trial.
See,
which I will not.
I was like, I don't have that in my feed, so don't speak. Don't get that in my feed.
I will not engage in it. And it's like, it's not because I don't care. It's not because it's just like, I can't do anything about it. It's just toxic. Why do I need, I don't need it in my life. I have no influence here.
Right.
So I just avoid it altogether. But it's tough because
Great.
some people
You know
just
it's going to be in my feed now
seeking it
because you
out.
just
Yeah,
said
I
it near my phone.
know. Mine too. Yeah.
I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Because no, see, that's, you know, what's interesting. Now there's a phenomenon that no one has been talking about with me. Everyone's talking to me about the things we're talking about. And then like Karen Reed and
Karen Reed is different in a
that's
way.
right.
Plus, I'm not emotionally invested. I'm just kind of
I'm
super
not,
emotionally invested.
right. Well, are you sure? I don't know about that. I'm feeling like a little different from you.
Well, it's kind of a New England thing. Just want the villains to get taken down.
I know. Well, oh my God. So, well, yes.
Like I said, it's one of those good movies where you see a character and it's like, I can't wait till they die. Or a good TV show.
And we're not specifying who that character is, right? Even though, well, it's not Karen.
It's not Karen.
No.
No.
By the way, her dad is super sweet. I saw her dad on a TikTok yesterday. I'm like, oh, he's so sweet. Never seen him. Yeah, I didn't even know her dad was alive. So, but anyway, randomness. But yes.
Yeah, she was a finance teacher at Bentley.
I do.
I just found this out last week.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Oh yeah, she had a very good career.
Yeah, I would have listed 1,000 things before I got to.
Yeah, I mean,
teacher at Bentley. Professor at Bentley.
So I mean, here's the jump aside, you know, because people loved the whole Karen Reed show last week. I was like, I can't keep talking about this, but here we are. But you know,
we'll get more into it in the third trial.
Oh my God. You're so right. I know yesterday I was like, I've never watched for verdict stuff, but my computer was ticking away like the ticker. And I'm like watching, you know, every 5-minute break. I was like, no verdict. And then when she came, I'll call her Auntie Bev with all due respect. When Auntie Bev was like, we're going to leave early. I'm like, girl, you need to retire.
She wouldn't take a jury's hypothetical question. Isn't the whole trial a hypothetical question?
Yes. That whole, so I didn't see what happened until after workday yesterday because I don't have time, but I did see. And then when I saw what happened, I was like, why can't you answer that question? And the appeal process should already the paperwork should just be in. I mean, it should already be in process.
Did you see any of the prosecution closing?
Sorry, everybody. We've jumped off onto this, and everyone's like, "Wait, what happened? We were just talking about summer and boundaries and family and people,
boundaries, social media boundaries."
Yeah, social media boundaries. What were you asking?
Have you seen any of the prosecution closing?
I did.
He spent about 5 minutes saying they couldn't tell you what happened.
Yes, I know.
But that doesn't mean reasonable doubt.
I know. I actually had a conversation with someone about the fact that he gave it to them. He gave it to them, and we're still debating.
We can't tell you anything. We know nothing for sure.
But please make sure you find her guilty. I'm like, I can't. I can't.
It was great.
And then you add in, so yes, that, and then you add in Judge Canone's, I can't answer that question and I won't answer that question. It's like, girl, you can answer that question. I love how they kept coming back at her going, you actually can. You can actually answer that question. And she's like, no, because you know what she's doing.
Yep.
It's so obvious.
I know.
So whether you think she's guilty or not.
But there's a difference.
The appeal we should already be on the next trial already.
But I have strong boundaries between like that and the Diddy trial because I just won't get into the Diddy trial. There's certain things I won't get into.
So what's the difference? I mean, now that we're on this, just for a second, I just need to know psychologically. I agree with you because the Diddy trial is just. I mean, I have heard little bits and pieces. Now it's going to be in my feed because you talked about this. The Karen
Reed trial is just New England drama.
It's such good drama, though.
The Diddy trial is
because it's not even about Karen
legitimate
Reed.
Evil.
And so the things I can say.
And I have no control over this at all. I have no standing in it.
You don't have any control over Karen Reed either.
No, but it's not.
It's not really about Karen Reed. You like the drama, like the stuff that's going on with all the players.
I want to see it come unraveled.
You want to see Karen Reed get acquitted, and then you want to see all the fallout with a lot of people. But the whole thing with the Diddy, this is from the psychology of the very limited that I know about the Diddy trial, and I've heard little bits and pieces like of audio, and I was so repulsed and disgusted. That was the turnoff for me. That I would not want to be a juror. I'd love to be a juror in the Karen Reed trial, but I would not like to be a juror in the Diddy trial
You would
because
neither of us would ever make the jury. In the Karen Reed trial.
I know. I don't even know how the people that made it into the jury
I'm
pool
still
made
trying
it.
to figure out how they found 12 people they could put on that jury.
When she asked this week, okay, we're having a little fun moment here.
Yeah.
When the judge asked this week on Monday, did they all do their homework and not do anything and didn't talk to anyone about it? And
Right.
come on. Like, I'm sorry. Here's my psychology hat. It is human nature. It is so hard to.
And then they asked if they could use the stuff she said in the interview, but they're not paying attention to anything outside the courtroom. If we can use stuff that she said,
but the stuff was that they're talking about the stuff that was introduced in the courtroom by the prosecution. But there's no way they haven't looked at stuff. I mean, I'm not saying they're lying, but
no, they're lying.
I did not say that.
No, well, I mean,
you're saying that.
I'm not saying it maliciously.
I just find it very difficult.
Unless they put them in a hotel and black out the windows.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're not sequestering these people, you can't live in New England.
No way.
You can't live in any part of Massachusetts. No, forget New England. You cannot live in this. Everybody has heard of it. Even if you're not following it, everyone. If you say Karen Reed, people are like, they have a reaction.
Yeah.
Everybody. And there's just no way that people aren't going home and on the weekend and being like, oh my God. And they're not seeing stuff about Judge. They're not seeing stuff about like all the stuff that they didn't get privy to last week. But it's, oh, come on.
That's kind of the threat in this situation, because it's not about Karen Reed.
No.
It's about getting away with the powers that be, getting away with what they're apparently trying to get away with. Now,
this comes back to the beginning of the top of the hour when I started talking about unhealthy things with boundaries and people in power differentials that think that they can have power over you, and they do.
Yep.
And what can you do about it? Because sometimes when you're doing all the right things, which I'm going to make a case for watching, because I'm not there, but I am watching a lot of it, that the defense is doing all the right things, and still you and I are into the fact that we're going to have a third trial.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's a power differential. They have set that the defense has set a boundary. They're in the right, but
do you understand the
corruption side, unfortunately.
Do you understand the verdict slip?
Do I understand the verdict slip? I did see some of it.
It's stunning.
If you're very, very, it's not even smart. What would be, if you were let's say I'm trying to find the right words. If you are an educated person to a certain extent that would not know some of the nuances of how to read into some of that.
If you're a legal professor, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question of having it rewritten or reworded, I think, is reasonable. I think that I was watching other lawyers talk about it yesterday, that it absolutely, that are in judge position, that was a reasonable question to ask it to be rewritten so it was clearer. She refuses because she knows this is exactly what he said. The defense attorney said yesterday, it's going to end up exactly because it's confusing.
Because what they want to do is convict her of DUI.
Right.
And then leave her off the rest of the stuff. Right. But I don't know how you would do that with that verdict slip. I'm unclear on how you would do that.
Right. And
that's what they want to do.
And I found it very telling that Judge Cannoni said, don't mind about the consequences of what you're doing. Wait a second. What? Of course, wow. Juror, you heard that, right?
Yeah.
She said, don't worry. You don't worry about the consequences of what your judgment is on this. Yeah, that actually comes into, because you're looking at, if we're giving her guilty and it's all connected, we are going to think about the consequences, because if we say she's a DUI, that's very different than saying she's killed somebody. There are consequences, and people have psychologically the right to ask that question, have it separated out for them. Mm-hmm. I don't know the laws. I'm only sidebarring Monday morning quarterbacking here, but psychologically, I'm watching it going, oh, this is a gaslight.
It appears from the outside that any conviction on any of the charges convicts all of the charges.
That's what it looks like.
That's what it appears.
Right. And that's what I think the jury's asking, like,
Yes.
how is that fair? I think they're asking essentially, how can we do this and actually be fair? Because we don't find it. And she just wants her to be, it's going to, even if they don't come back as a hung jury, it's going to appeal.
Oh God, yeah.
Because
the only way you avoid a third trial is she's acquitted.
Right.
That's the only way you avoid a third trial.
Right. But it's got it.
Because there's so much appeal. Well, we say that.
Well, we say that, but yeah, but you know that Alessi and Jackson have, you don't have to be a lawyer or in that courtroom to see that the amount of mistrial things that are grounds for appeal. Like you have to.
I want to buy Alan Jackson the biggest, best bottle of bourbon I can get. He is such a good guy.
I know. He's so sweet. He's very sweet. And Alessi's great too.
Yeah. I haven't had much contact with him yet.
Well, you've had contact with Jackson.
No, I mean, I've heard more of his.
Oh, you've heard more from his. Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, he's a great.
Because I limit myself with it. I've got one source that watches the trial and does a couple reels during the course of the day. And she's biased, but by the same token. See,
I have found 2 defense attorneys and 1 prosecuting attorney that reel into my feed and I watch, and they're pretty good about keeping their boundary, about like understanding, explain, because they do explanation. They don't come in with opinion. They put an explanation out of what's happened, and then they ask for people from like the feed to chime in, and then they respond. But it's very good. I like that, because then it's not them just telling people how to think.
It feels to me, and this is me looking for chaos and conflict.
Right.
But it appears to me that
it appeals. Nice spray in there.
It appears to me, and it appears to me that there needs to be mass revolt about this. This is not going to happen in the courtroom. This is going to happen in the court of public opinion. If justice gets done.
Good luck.
I know.
Good luck.
I know that's the scary part. Because if the pressure isn't applied, this is going to they're going to railroad. The train is just going to roll.
I think the train is off the tracks and flying down the street. We are far beyond that. We have gone through the station. We're on the other side. We're in the ocean.
Yeah.
We need a new train.
It's like the Coors Light train in the commercials.
Yes. We need a new train with a new conductor.
Yeah.
We do. So I'm just saying. So anyways, back to boundaries for the summer as I finish this up. I think going back to taking away from like your next upcoming barbecues or your summer events that you're going to, or I know that people, did the whole Father's Day thing, that's one of the reasons why I was talking about with clients last week, is people were like, I have to be around family and, but I think that, setting your own internal boundaries and knowing what's healthy, asking people if you don't know, that are not your family members, and you talked about groupthink, and I never even got into that, but about like, don't get involved in the groupthink, know that you could be a victim to groupthink. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, watch for power differentials, try to stay away from those if you can, because they can be setups, like when you get a group of people together in family, and if you know it and that's going to be unhealthy, make a plan of how to manage that. Yep. And my first one is always limit your time. Limit your time there, and or say, if you really feel really strongly like you can't do it and you have the ability to say, I can't make it this year, I can't make it to that. Protect your inner peace. Put a peace bubble around you if you're able to.
Yep.
And if you're not, and you have to be around not healthy or people who have their own agendas or their own axes to grind, or they have envy or jealousy, or they have stories to tell or whatever, or they have their own opinions, do the best you can to protect your peace.
Yeah. And don't let it haunt you for 7 weeks.
Yeah. And people always say,
gonna land.
when I say to people, like, try not to do it, I always say, hey, it's hard. I'll be the first person to tell you, because people always think, oh, you're a psychologist. Nope. It lands on me. When something lands on me, I can sit on it and I have to work it, because
and isn't it one of the important points here is it's not linear. You don't stop doing it all the time. Right. Sometimes you get hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you're really good at doing it, and sometimes it can be a hit hard, and I think if you can have good support people around you, that also helps, because if you have people that are supportive, and that you have 1 or 2 people in your corner to just be able to say, hey, you're good, you're okay, that helps as well. It's hard sitting with stuff alone. And a lot of people do sit with alone because a lot of people feel embarrassed to talk about it. But if you can find one or two one person, I call them the yummies, your yummy person, that will really support you, that would be really beneficial.
Would it be true to say if it's hitting you hard, you feel there's some truth in it, which is why you need support?
Truth in what way? That the person that people are.
The way it would hit really hard is if you see some validity in it. You see some, it's hitting chords with you.
Well, I'm gonna put a caveat to that because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's hitting a truth. It could be that it's
not a truth, a feeling that you.
Oh, it's hitting a feeling that's hitting a chord that's been hit before. That it doesn't mean that the statement or the thing that's happening is true,
right?
But it's hitting a chord of like feeling like less than or self-doubt or confidence or things like that. Sure, absolutely. I want to make that clear because a lot of times it's
good differential
because that's a very because just because someone says it so doesn't make it so.
Right.
Just because someone makes up a narrative doesn't make it true. When facts are facts, right? So you have to go with what you know. Anyway, so that was a very interesting conversation today about.
We only get derailed for a little bit.
Yeah, right. And remember, new train, new conductor. Oh my God.
I don't want to take another train ride.
I know. Well, let's see. Next week we may be talking about the new trial.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. So everybody have a great week and I will talk to you next Wednesday.